Congratulations. You fell for it. You actually fell for the oldest, most aggressive pyramid scheme in the galaxy. It started with a poster, didn't it? A gleaming white helmet against a backdrop of stellar fire promising order, stability, and purpose. Or maybe it was a recruiter, a man with a smile so sharp it could cut glass and a uniform so clean it made you painfully aware of the grease stains on your own clothes. He spoke of a united galaxy, of bringing peace to the lawless outer rim, and of a stable career with unparalleled travel opportunities. He didn't need to be a good salesman. He just needed to find you. You, on your forgotten dust ball of a homeworld where the sky is the color of rust, and the only career paths are moisture farming or becoming nutrient paste for a crate dragon. You, with your future already written in the grit that coats your tongue and the sour stink of desperation that hangs in the air. The Empire wasn't offering you a job, it was offering an escape, a way out. So you signed the datapad, your heart a frantic drum of hope and terror. You were going to be someone, a hero. Too bad the fine print was written in a language you couldn't understand. The cold, hard language of reality. Your new life of galactic significance begins on a transport ship that smells like recycled air, unwashed bodies, and vomit. The excitement of liftoff quickly curdles into a nauseating, week-long journey crammed shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of other hopefuls, all of you sharing the same wide-eyed, idiotic optimism. This isn't a passenger liner, it's a cattle car. When the doors finally hiss open, it's not to a grand, welcoming ceremony. It's to the sterile, oppressive grayness of an Imperial Academy on some miserable, storm-lashed planet like Karita. The air tastes of metal and disinfectant. The first thing they do is take your name. You are no longer Jax or Kale or whatever vaguely hopeful name your parents gave you. You are now TK-734. A designation, a number. Your head is shaved. Your civilian clothes are incinerated. You are handed a single black jumpsuit that will be your only outfit for the foreseeable future. This isn't about building a team. It's about demolition. The demolition of you. The first lesson of the Empire is simple. You, the individual, do not matter. You are a component, a replaceable part in a vast, uncaring machine. And your training is simply the process of grinding you down until you fit. Forget heroic training montages. Your education is a masterclass in psychological abuse masquerading as discipline. Your drill sergeant is a man whose vocabulary consists of three things: shouting, creative insults about your parentage, and more shouting. Your days are a blur of marching in perfect formation until your feet are raw blisters, disassembling and reassembling a blaster rifle until your fingers bleed, and obstacle courses that seem specifically designed to cause hairline fractures. The goal isn't to make you an elite warrior, it's to make you obedient, to instill a level of exhaustion so profound that you stop thinking and simply react, to replace your will with the Emperor's. And the brainwashing is relentless. In sterile classrooms, you're force-fed a diet of glorious propaganda. You learn the truth. The Jedi were decadent traitors, the Republic was a corrupt failure, and the Rebellion is a terrorist scourge funded by gangsters and alien malcontents. Any alien species that isn't human-adjacent is presented as primitive, untrustworthy, or an outright threat. You chant slogans until your throat is raw. Peace through power. Order above all. It's a corporate indoctrination seminar from hell, and failure to show enthusiasm earns you extra latrine duty or a corrective session in the simulator that leaves you shaking and disoriented. You're not just being trained, you're being programmed. After months of this, you barely recognize the hollowed-out reflection staring back at you from the polished black floor. The hope is gone, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache and the conditioned reflex to snap to attention at any loud noise. You've made it. You've graduated. You are a stormtrooper. You stood on that parade ground, a sea of anonymous white and black, and felt a flicker of something you mistook for pride. You've been broken, reforged, and handed a blaster. You've earned your armor. But what you're about to discover is that you haven't been given a suit of life-saving high-tech battle armor. You've been issued your own personal prison. And if you think the academy was unpleasant, just wait until you have to climb inside that suffocating plastoid coffin for the first time. The first time they seal you into the armor, you understand. The pride you felt on the parade ground evaporates in a puff of recycled air. It begins with the clicks and hisses of the vacuum seals locking into place. Suddenly, the vast, sterile world of the Empire shrinks to the size of your own skull. You are encased. The immediate smell hits you first, a nauseating cocktail of industrial cleanser. The faint, rancid sweat of the trooper who wore this before you, and the plastic tang of your own impending doom. You take a breath, and the respirator unit answers with a mechanical wheeze, feeding you air that tastes like it's been filtered through a dirty sock. Welcome to your new body. It's a cheap, mass-produced coffin, and you're going to be living in it. Your window to the galaxy is now a T-shaped slit of polarized black glass. Your field of view is a joke. Forget peripheral vision. That's a luxury for people who aren't considered disposable. You have to turn your entire head, a stiff and grinding motion, just to see what's next to you. And the heads-up display? Some genius decided to cram it with flickering, useless data. A compass that spins uselessly inside identical gray corridors. An ammunition counter that glitches if you move too fast. And a biomonitor that serves only to inform you, in stark imperial font, just how high your heart rate is. It's not a tactical advantage, it's a distraction. A constant stream of digital noise that makes it impossible to focus on the one thing that matters, the enemy you can't properly see. And then there's the sound, or the lack of it. The outside world is a dull, muffled dream. But inside the helmet, every sound you make is an orchestra of misery. Your own breathing is a thunderous, Darth Vader-esque rasp in your ears, a constant reminder of your own panic. The static-laced squawk of the internal comlink is a nightmare, turning clear commands into garbled nonsense. Is your sergeant ordering you to move up or self-destruct? You don't know. The only thing you hear clearly is the panicked breathing of the man next to you, and the distant, tinny pew-pew of blaster fire that sounds less like a threat and more like a video game, right up until the moment it melts a hole through your friend's chest. But surely, this state-of-the-art armor protects you, right? That's the whole point. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. That gleaming white plastoid, so intimidating on the recruitment posters, has the defensive properties of compressed porcelain. It might deflect a glancing blow from a thrown rock or a poorly aimed fist, but a direct blaster bolt? It turns that section of your armor into a bubbling, molten crater, flash cooking you inside your own suit. It's not armor, it's a uniform. Its primary function isn't to protect you, but to make you look identical to the 1,000 other saps in your legion. It's a bright white shoot-me sign for any rebel, smuggler, or irritated farmer with a hunting rifle. You are not an elite soldier. You are a target. An anonymous, expendable, gloriously white target. And the best part? You'll be wearing this for hours. Days, even. The joints chafe your skin raw. An itch on your nose becomes an exercise in maddening futility. On a desert world like Tatooine, the suit becomes a personal sauna, recycling your own humid sweat until your jumpsuit is soaked through. On a cold planet like Hoth, it's a freezer, the plastoid offering zero insulation against the biting wind. You are trapped. You can't eat, you can't drink, and you definitely can't relieve yourself without a full, humiliating disassembly process. You stand there, sealed in your agonizing second skin, waiting for the heroic battles the posters promised. But that's not what's coming next. The glorious combat is a lie. What's coming is a silent, soul-crushing enemy that no armor can protect you from. The sheer, mind-numbing banality of being a cog in the Imperial machine. Forget what you saw in the hollow thrillers. The life of an Imperial Stormtrooper is not a relentless series of heroic charges and desperate last stands. That's the highlight reel they show the taxpayers on Coruscant. Your life, TK-734, is an abyss of boredom so profound it could be weaponized. 99% of your service isn't about bringing order to the galaxy. It's about standing still, or walking in straight lines, for hours, and hours. Your primary function is guard duty. That's the official term for standing perfectly motionless in a featureless gray corridor, staring at another featureless gray corridor. You're on an 8-hour shift, maybe 12 if an officer forgot you exist. Your high-tech helmet is a sensory deprivation tank, and your only companions are the rhythmic hiss of your respirator and the growing numbness in your legs. You are a human security camera, a living statue whose only purpose is to look vaguely intimidating to the occasional maintenance droid that trundles past. The most exciting thing to happen on your last shift was a flickering light panel. You filed a report. Nothing happened. Welcome to the thrilling life of an Imperial peacekeeper. When you're not guarding empty hallways, you're marching. You march to the mess hall. You march to the armory. You march to the barracks. You march on parade grounds under the unforgiving glare of a sun or the sterile glow of hangar bay lights. Pointless, endless drills designed to keep you too tired to think, too sore to complain. The sound of 1,000 identical boots hitting the deck in perfect unison is the Imperial anthem, a symphony of crushed individuality. You're not a soldier. You're a component in a military parade, a piece of living architecture. And what are you marching for? The reward at the end of the day is the barracks. Imagine a long gray room with zero privacy, lined with bunks stacked 3 high. Your personal space is a thin mattress that feels less like a bed and more like a lightly padded shelf. The air is thick with the smell of stale sweat, ozone from charging power packs, and the quiet, desperate snores of exhausted men. This is your sanctuary. This is where you get to stare at the metal bunk above you and question every single life choice that led you to this moment, but not too loudly. The Imperial Security Bureau has ears everywhere, and complaining is a symptom of rebellious thoughts. Then there's the food. Oh, the glorious Imperial rations. You file into the mess hall, another gray box, and slap a tray down. A grumpy server droid plops a scoop of gray paste onto it. That's your meal. It's called Nutri-Paste, or Cal Stew, or some other vaguely scientific name that fails to disguise its true nature, a textureless, tasteless sludge engineered to provide the minimum caloric intake required to keep a human body functioning. It has the flavor profile of wet cardboard and the consistency of setting concrete. Some days there are colored cubes. They are supposed to be vegetables. They taste of nothing. This is the fuel for the Imperial war machine, a lukewarm slurry of synthetic proteins and regret. You eat it because the alternative is starving. After your gourmet meal, it's time for recreation. If you're lucky, this means an hour in the rec room, a place with a holographic didgeridoo board where half the pieces are missing, or a screen showing curated, mind-numbingly patriotic news from the HoloNet. Most troopers just sit and stare, too drained to even speak. Others engage in the time-honored military tradition of weapons maintenance, polishing their E-11 blaster rifles for the 10th time this week. You learn every groove and seam of your weapon. You know it's a cheaply made, unreliable piece of junk that's prone to overheating, but it's the only thing in this galaxy that's truly yours. This is your life. A repeating cycle of guard, march, eat, sleep. You are trapped in a sterile, gray, bureaucratic purgatory. You came here seeking purpose and adventure. You found routine and exhaustion, but don't worry. This soul-crushing monotony will eventually be broken. It will be shattered by the sudden, terrifying, and utterly chaotic reality of actual combat. And you're about to find out that the only thing worse than the boredom is the alternative. This is it, the moment you've been trained for. The alarm blares, a violent shrieking sound that cuts through the sterile hum of the Star Destroyer. An officer you've never seen before, his face a mask of panic and cheap bravado, barks orders that are immediately rendered incomprehensible by the static in your helmet. You're bundled into a troop transport, a metal coffin packed so tight you can feel the frantic, shallow breaths of the men crushed against you. The ship lurches. The descent begins. This isn't a glorious orbital drop. It's a violent, stomach-churning fall, and you're just cargo. The ramp slams down, and your world explodes. It's not a clean, cinematic battle. It's a disorienting, full-sensory assault. The air is thick with the acrid smell of ozone and burnt metal. The noise is a physical force, a deafening, chaotic symphony of blaster fire, explosions, and screams. The screams are the worst part. They come through your comlink as distorted, digitized shrieks of agony before cutting out abruptly. Your training, your endless drills, all of it evaporates in a single, heart-stopping moment of pure, unadulterated fear. Your limited field of view is a curse. You can't see where the enemy fire is coming from. Red and green bolts slice through the air from everywhere and nowhere. You see the trooper to your left, a guy you shared a tasteless meal with an hour ago, jerk violently and collapse in a heap, a smoking black hole where his chest plate used to be. There's no dramatic death speech, no time for a last word. He's just gone. A piece of equipment, now broken. Your sergeant is yelling something. Advance. Take cover. Spread out. It's all just noise. You do what the man next to you does. You run. You find cover behind some rubble, your heart hammering against your ribs like a trapped animal. You lift your E11 blaster. Your hands are slick with sweat inside your gloves. You try to aim, but the weapon feels clumsy and foreign. The recoil is jarring. The iconic pew-pew sound is a lie. Up close, it's a terrifying crack that echoes in your helmet. You squeeze the trigger, sending a spray of red bolts in the general direction of the enemy. Did you hit anything? You have no idea. You can't see them. They're shadows, fleeting shapes in the smoke and chaos. But they can see you. Oh, they can see you. A walking, talking, bright white target. Your purpose in this battle is brutally simple, and it has nothing to do with victory. You are a distraction. You are a walking shield. Your job is to draw fire, to soak up enemy ammunition, to die in sufficient numbers that the rebels reveal their positions. You are the first wave, the disposable grunts sent to test the defenses. The real soldiers, the Imperial Army troopers or the rare, terrifying death troopers, are behind you, waiting for you to clear a path with your corpses. Your life is a resource, and the Empire is spending it freely. You see a grenade arc through the air. It's not like in the Hollows, where there's a dramatic zoom and time to be a hero. It's just a small, dark object tumbling end over end, and then a flash of white-hot light and a wave of pressure that throws you from your feet. Your ears ring, your vision swims. You scramble up, disoriented. The two troopers who were taking cover with you are gone. There's just a blackened crater and the smell of cooked plastoid. You are utterly, terrifyingly alone. This isn't war. This is slaughter, a meat grinder. And you're the meat. You huddle there, behind your crumbling piece of cover, your blaster feeling heavier by the second. The posters promised you would bring order to the galaxy. They didn't tell you that order would be built on a foundation of your bones. And as you try to steady your breathing, a horrifying thought begins to creep in, a thought more dangerous than any rebel blaster. This is insane. This is all completely, utterly insane. But you can't afford to think that. The Empire has a cure for that kind of thinking. It's a psychological straitjacket they built for you back at the Academy, and you're about to feel it tighten. The firefight ends. Not with a glorious victory cheer, but with a sudden, unnerving silence, punctuated by the groans of the wounded and the crackle of burning debris. You survived. Don't flatter yourself. It was luck, not skill. Now comes the hard part. Not the cleanup, but the quiet moments afterward, back on the ship, when the adrenaline fades and the thoughts you've been trained to suppress begin to bubble up from the depths of your psyche. You saw your squad mates, your bunk mates, extinguished like faulty glow rods. You saw the chaos, the incompetence of your officers, the sheer pointless waste of it all. A dangerous question forms in your mind, a tiny whisper of treason. Why? Why are you here, on this miserable rock, killing people you've never met? The answer you were given in the academy, for order, for peace, to crush a terrorist rebellion, suddenly feels thin as the plastoid that failed to save TK-502. This is where your real training kicks in. Not the marching, not the blaster drills, but the mental conditioning. The Empire knows that soldiers who think are a liability, so they built a cage for your mind, and you help them lock the door from the inside. The first bar of this cage is cognitive dissonance. You just participated in a brutal, violent suppression. You saw homes destroyed. You may have even been ordered to fire on targets that didn't look like soldiers. To reconcile the horror of your actions with the glorious purpose you've been fed, your brain performs a desperate act of mental gymnastics. They weren't people, they were rebel sympathizers. They weren't homes, they were insurgent nests. You weren't committing a massacre, you were pacifying a hostile sector. You repeat the official terminology to yourself like a mantra, a desperate prayer to ward off the creeping horror of the truth. The second bar is paranoia. You look at the surviving members of your squad. You've been through hell together, but can you trust them? The Imperial Security Bureau, the ISB, is a phantom that haunts every barracks and mess hall. They have agents everywhere. That trooper who's a little too quiet, is he grieving, or is he having seditious thoughts? The one who's a little too gung-ho, quoting propaganda like it's scripture, is he a true believer, or an informant trying to trap you? Voicing any doubt, any complaint, even a simple expression of fear, is a career-ending, and possibly life-ending, mistake. So you say nothing. You put on the same blank, obedient face as everyone else. The silence in the barracks isn't from discipline, it's from mutual corrosive suspicion. You are more alone in a squad of 10 than you ever were on your backwater homeworld. The third bar is the cultivated hatred. The propaganda wasn't just for the classroom, it was for this exact moment. When you feel a flicker of empathy for the enemy, you have to snuff it out. You have to remember the images of alien monstrosities and treasonous scum. You have to dehumanize them, reduce them to a concept, a target. It's a survival mechanism. If you allow yourself to believe that the being on the other end of your blaster is a person with a family, a life, hopes of their own, you won't be able to pull the trigger next time. And in the Empire, a trooper who hesitates is a dead trooper. So you cling to the hatred. You nurture it. It's a shield for your conscience. And right now, your conscience is a wound that can't be allowed to fester. You stand at your locker, cleaning your blaster, the smell of solvent sharp in the air. You force the images from your mind. The smoking crater, the look of terror on a civilian's face, the digital scream of a dying friend. You replace them with the approved thoughts. I am a servant of the Empire. I bring order. I am loyal. There is no alternative. You are actively participating in your own brainwashing because the alternative is to face the truth. You are a tool for a monstrous regime, and your hands are stained with the blood of its victims. But your mission isn't always about chaotic battles against armed rebels. Sometimes it's quieter, more personal, and in many ways, so much worse. You're about to learn the difference between being a soldier and being an enforcer, and you will discover just how dirty the work of keeping the peace really is. There's an insidious lie at the heart of the Imperial Project, the idea that you are a soldier. Soldiers fight wars against other soldiers, but most of your deployments won't be to active war zones. They'll be to pacified worlds, occupied territories, and Imperial protectorates. These are all just sanitized terms for planets that have already been broken, and your job is to stand on their neck to make sure they don't get any ideas about getting up. This is not war. This is occupation. And you are not a soldier. You are the muscle for a protection racket on a galactic scale. Your new mission, random security checkpoints. You're standing on a muddy street on some backwater planet, the air thick with the smell of alien spices and simmering resentment. You are a walking symbol of everything these people hate. Your white armor is an obscenity against their drab, impoverished world. Your job is to stop civilians, farmers, mechanics, merchants, and demand to see their identification. You don't know what you're looking for. A forged chain code? A nervous twitch? Your officer gave a vague order. Look for anything suspicious, which means you hold all the power. A father and his small child approach. You lower your E11, the gesture automatic, menacing. The father flinches. The child hides behind his legs, staring at your helmet's soulless black lenses with wide, terrified eyes. You run his code. It's clean. But maybe he looked at you the wrong way. Maybe you don't like his face. You have the authority to detain him, to ransack his meager belongings, to turn his family's life upside down on a whim. In this moment, you are the monster in a child's nightmare. You are the embodiment of faceless, arbitrary cruelty. You wave them on, your throat tight. There is no glory here, just a grubby, sickening feeling in the pit of your stomach. Then comes the resource acquisition support. The Empire needs Tibanna gas, or dunium, or kyber crystals. The local population is uncooperative. So your squad is sent to oversee the transfer. You stand guard around a mine or a refinery, your blaster held at the ready, while Imperial droids and corporate enforcers strip mine the planet. You watch as the locals are forced to work in brutal conditions, their world being poisoned and plundered for the good of an empire that sees them as nothing more than an obstacle on a balance sheet. They don't fight back with blasters. They fight back with looks of pure, undiluted hatred. They mutter curses in languages you don't understand, but the meaning is crystal clear. You are enforcing theft. You are the uniformed thug standing guard while your boss robs a house. Worse still are the public order missions. A protest has formed in the Central Plaza. They're not armed rebels. They're hungry citizens, chanting slogans, demanding fair food distribution. Your orders are to disperse them. You form a line with your squad, a wall of white plastoid and black rifle barrels. The crowd yells. They throw garbage, rotten fruit. A rock bounces harmlessly off your helmet. The officer gives the order. You advance. You use your blaster not to kill, but as a club. You shove old men. You knock over women. You are the iron fist of the state, brought down on people whose only crime is poverty and desperation. You are restoring order, but it feels an awful lot like bullying. In these moments, there are no easy justifications. There is no cognitive dissonance strong enough to hide the truth. These are not insurgent nests or rebel scum. These are people, and you are their oppressor. You are the reason they live in fear. The propaganda told you that you were bringing civilization to the galaxy, but as you stand over a cowering civilian, you realize you are the barbarian. You are the force of chaos and misery. You return to the barracks, the grime of the city clinging to your armor. You can't just polish it off. This filth feels like it seeped through the plastoid, through your jumpsuit, and stained your very soul. The silence among your squad is heavier than ever. No one talks about it. To talk about it is to admit what you are becoming. The battles were terrifying, but they were simple. This is a slow-acting poison. It's the moral injury that festers long after the physical bruises have healed. The memories of the firefights are nightmares, sharp and violent. But the memories of the faces in the crowd, the fear, the hatred, the despair, they become ghosts, and they follow you everywhere, even into the silent darkness of your own helmet. The Empire doesn't have a word for what's happening to you. They have designations: combat fatigue, operational stress, disciplinary infractions. These are neat, sterile terms for a mind that is coming apart at the seams. You've survived the battles. You've endured the occupations. But the war isn't over. It has simply moved, migrating from the physical world into the private, inescapable space behind your eyes. It starts subtly. You're on guard duty in another silent gray corridor. The only sound is your own breathing. But then you hear it. A faint, tinny scream. The ghost of a dead man's last transmission on your comlink. You flinch, spinning around, blaster raised. There's nothing there. It was a memory, an echo bouncing around the inside of your skull. The trooper on the next post gives you a look. You straighten up, heart pounding, and pretend it didn't happen. But it does happen. Again and again, the phantom sizzle of a blaster bolt hitting flesh, the imagined crunch of a grenade. Your past has become a minefield, and you never know when you'll take a wrong step. Sleep offers no escape. It's a portal back to the worst moments of your life, replayed in high definition, with you as the star. You're back in the firefight, but this time you're a second too slow. You're trying to scream a warning to TK-218, but your voice won't work. You see the blaster bolt hit him over and over. You wake up in your bunk, drenched in a cold sweat, your own muffled gasp caught in your throat. You lie there in the darkness of the barracks, listening to the quiet snores of the other troopers, and you feel a profound, terrifying isolation. Are they dreamings of home? Or are they trapped in their own private hells, just like you? You'll never ask. You can't. During the day, you function on a razor's edge of hypervigilance. Every sudden noise is a threat. A maintenance droid clattering down the hall is an incoming grenade. A dropped tool in the hangar bay is a sniper shot. You find yourself scanning crowds not for suspicious activity, but for threats, for ambushes that exist only in your memory. Your body is permanently braced for an impact that never comes. This constant state of high alert is utterly exhausting. It grinds you down, leaving you irritable, jumpy, and emotionally raw. Your CO sees it as insubordination. He puts you on report for being on edge. The irony is so bitter, it could curdle milk. They trained you to be a weapon, and now they're punishing you for being sharp. To cope, you retreat. You build a wall inside your head, brick by painful brick. You become numb. The jokes in the mess hall don't land. The camaraderie that other squads seem to share feels like a foreign language. You are a ghost haunting your own life, a spectator in a body that just goes through the motions. This numbness is your armor's final, innermost layer. It protects you from the crushing weight of what you've done and what you've seen. But it also protects you from everything else. Joy, hope, connection. They can't get through. You are safe, and you are empty. The Empire has no infrastructure for this. There is no therapy, no counseling, no support group. Mental health care is a decadent concept from the failed Republic. In the Imperial military, you are a piece of equipment. If a blaster rifle malfunctions, it's stripped for parts or melted down. If a trooper malfunctions, the same logic applies. You see it happen. Troopers who break, who have public meltdowns, who refuse an order, who simply can't stop shaking, they just disappear, reassigned to a penal legion. Sent on a high-risk mission they're not expected to survive. Or a quiet, accidental death in a training exercise. You know the truth. The Empire doesn't fix its broken toys. It throws them away. So you hold it together. You lock the screams and the ghosts and the guilt behind a steel door in your mind. You stand your post. You clean your rifle. You put on your helmet, the very symbol of your torment, and you pray that no one sees the cracks forming in your foundation. Because you've seen the glorious career path the Empire offers its heroes, and now you're starting to wonder about the retirement plan. Surely, after all this, there must be a reward at the end. A quiet place to finally rest. Dream on. So you've done it all. You survived the academy, the suffocating armor, the soul-crushing boredom, the terror of combat, the dirty work of occupation, and the slow-motion implosion of your own mind. You've given the Empire your youth, your innocence, and your sanity. Now what? What's the golden handshake for a lifetime of loyal, brutal service? Where is the quiet farm on a peaceful agricultural world they vaguely hinted at in those recruitment hollows? Let's be brutally honest. There is no retirement plan. The concept is a joke. The Empire doesn't invest in long-term assets. It utilizes disposable resources. And you, TK-734, are the most disposable resource of all. You were never meant to get old. The system is designed to use you up and discard the remains, and it is brutally efficient at doing so. Let's look at your most likely career trajectory. Your story probably ends on some forgotten moon with a name you can't pronounce, bleeding out from a blaster wound inflicted by a terrified farmer defending their home. You won't die heroically in the Emperor's name. You'll die in the mud, staring up at an alien sky. Your last sensation, the coppery taste of your own blood filling your helmet. Your designation will be struck from the roster. Your armor will be cleaned and reissued to some other poor sap, fresh from the academy, and the great Imperial machine will grind on without noticing you are gone. That is the most common and, in a strange way, the most merciful end. But perhaps you're lucky you don't die. Instead, a rebel explosive takes your leg, or a Wookiee decides to use your arms for celebratory decorations. You are maimed, catastrophically injured, no longer fit for frontline duty. Does the Empire reward your sacrifice with a pension and the galaxy's best prosthetic care? Don't be absurd. You are a faulty piece of equipment. You'll be unceremoniously discharged on the nearest civilized world with a handful of credits that won't even cover a week's rent. You're left to beg on the streets, a broken man in a tattered uniform, a cautionary tale that everyone ignores. The very civilians you once oppressed now look at you with a mixture of pity and contempt. You are a ghost of the Empire's power, haunting the alleyways of the galaxy it claims to rule. So, what other option do you have? Desertion, the ultimate fantasy. To just walk away, dump the armor in a filthy alley, trade your blaster for a few credits, and disappear into the teeming masses of the galaxy. It sounds like freedom, but it's just another kind of prison. The Empire does not tolerate loose ends. The ISB will hunt you. A bounty will be placed on your head, ensuring every lowlife with a blaster from Coruscant to the Outer Rim is looking for you. Every time you see a Stormtrooper patrol, your heart will seize with terror. And what about the rebellion? Surely they'll take you in. You have valuable intelligence, after all. You try to contact a rebel cell, and they see one thing: a killer in a white helmet. To them, you are the face of their oppression. You're the one who kicked in their doors, who stood guard while their families were taken away, who shot their friends. If they don't shoot you on sight, they'll interrogate you with a cold fury, convinced you're a spy. You are a monster to your enemies and a traitor to your former masters. You belong nowhere. You are a man without a planet, without a people, hunted by everyone and trusted by no one. This is the final, crushing truth of your service. You were never a person. You were a number. You were never a peacekeeper. You were a tool of terror. You were never a hero. You were a cog in a machine that runs on fear and fueled by the lives of men exactly like you. You traded a miserable future on your homeworld for a promise of glory, only to find yourself with no future at all. As you huddle in the shadows of some grimy spaceport, you finally understand. The Empire didn't just take your name, it took everything, and it gave you nothing in return. Congratulations, Stormtrooper. You brought order to the galaxy. Now you get to live in it. Every society is built upon a contract, a foundational promise between the state and its people. But what happens when that promise is not a guarantee, but a transaction? What happens when paradise has a price, and the currency is not labor or loyalty, but a willingness to commit to violence? This is the story of the Terran Federation, a society that achieved global peace and prosperity by perfecting a single, insidious lie: that to be a complete human being, one must first be prepared to cease being one. The surface of the Federation is a carefully polished veneer of utopian achievement. Cities gleam with architectural perfection. Crime is a forgotten relic of a chaotic past, and its youth are beautiful, healthy, and filled with a potent sense of optimism. This is a world scrubbed clean of the social friction and political decay that plagued its ancestors. But this immaculate order is not an accident. It is the result of a chillingly precise social architecture. It is a peace maintained not by consensus, but by a deliberate and systemic act of exclusion. This gleaming world belongs only to a select few. The bedrock of this society is the stark division between two classes of humanity: the civilian and the citizen. To be born a civilian is to live a life of comfort and safety, but without a voice. Civilians cannot vote, cannot hold political office, and cannot shape the destiny of the society that protects them. They are spectators in their own world, enjoying the fruits of a system they have no power to change. Citizenship, on the other hand, is the key to the kingdom. It grants the franchise the right to govern and the full weight of social and political personhood. Yet this status is never inherited. It can only be earned through one path: federal service. This is the core transaction of the Federation, a period of grueling, often dangerous service to the state in exchange for a lifetime of power and relevance. The system presents this as the ultimate meritocracy, a filter to ensure that only those willing to place the body politic above their own body are fit to lead it. But in practice, it creates a permanent ruling class of veterans, a society governed exclusively by those who have been conditioned by the crucible of the military. This conditioning does not begin at the recruitment office. It begins in the classroom. The educational system of the Federation is the first and most crucial stage of indoctrination. In classes of history and moral philosophy, the curriculum is not an exercise in critical thought, but a clinical dissection of the past's failures. The collapse of 20th century democracies is presented not as a complex historical event, but as a moral pathology, a societal sickness of self-interest and entitlement for which federal service is the only cure. Teachers, often combat veterans themselves like John Rorschach, are not merely instructors, they are ideological gatekeepers. Their scars and missing limbs serve as physical proof of the philosophy they preach. That violence is the supreme authority, the final arbiter of right and wrong. The classroom becomes a barracks in disguise, a place where the young are taught that the very concept of civil rights without civic duty is a dangerous fantasy. This carefully constructed ideology creates a powerful allure. For the ambitious, like the brilliant Starship pilot Carmen Ibanez, federal service is the only ladder to a prestigious career. For the gifted, like the psychically talented Carl Jenkins, it offers access to opportunities unavailable to any civilian. And for the uncertain, like the earnest Johnny Rico, it offers something far more seductive: purpose, belonging, and the approval of his peers and family. The system masterfully co-opts the universal desires of youth for identity, for glory, for a meaningful life, and channels them into a single, state-sanctioned pipeline. They are not merely signing up for a job, they are applying to become whole. The societal architecture was complete, a gleaming machine engineered for a single, brutal purpose. It was a weapon, waiting patiently for an enemy to be pointed at. And in the cold, dark voids of space, that enemy was beginning to stir, ready to give this perfectly ordered society the one thing it secretly craved: a reason to unleash its children. A society that stakes its very identity on military service requires a constant, renewable supply of two things: willing bodies and a worthy enemy. The first is cultivated in the classroom, but the second must be manufactured in the public square. In the Terran Federation, the most powerful weapon is not the starship or the nuclear warhead, it is the broadcast signal. The state's control over information is absolute. A finely tuned engine designed to transform fear into patriotism, and patriotism into a blank check for war. At the heart of this engine is the Federal Network, a stream of media that blurs the line between news, entertainment, and military recruitment. Its signature segment, Would You Like to Know More?, is a masterclass in psychological conditioning. Each broadcast is a perfectly crafted piece of theater. The tone is upbeat and reassuring, the anchors are charismatic and authoritative, and the content is a carefully curated reality. These segments are not designed to inform the populace. They are designed to manage its emotions. They present a world of simple moral clarity, where the Federation is a shining beacon of human strength, and its enemies are a monolithic, subhuman threat. The genius of the propaganda lies in what it omits. When showcasing new military technology, the broadcasts focus on the sleek design of the weapons, the confident smiles of the soldiers, and the sterile computer-generated simulations of their destructive power. The human cost, the fear, the pain, the mangled bodies, is surgically removed from the narrative. The enemy, the arachnids, are never portrayed as a species with their own biology or potential intelligence. They are simply bugs, an infestation to be exterminated. This dehumanization is critical. It is far easier to send young men and women to their deaths if their target is not a thinking being, but a mindless pest. The language used is deliberately primitive. The only good bug is a dead bug. It's a slogan so simple, it bypasses rational thought and settles directly into the primal centers of the brain. This sanitized vision of conflict is then juxtaposed with scenes of idyllic civilian life. Children laugh and play in sun-drenched parks. Families gather for wholesome activities, and the promise of a peaceful, prosperous future is on full display. The implicit message is clear. This paradise is fragile, and it is the solemn duty of the mobile infantry to protect it from the encroaching darkness. The broadcasts create a feedback loop of anxiety and reassurance. First, they stoke the fear of an alien threat. Then they present the military as the only possible solution. By watching, the civilian population is not merely being entertained. They are participating in a ritual that reinforces the state's authority and validates the necessity of perpetual conflict. Every segment ends with the same cheerful, inviting question, "Would you like to know more?" framing the descent into jingoism as an act of intellectual curiosity. The most insidious aspect of this media machine is its effect on the youth. It sells federal service as the ultimate adventure, a rite of passage into a world of heroism and camaraderie. Live fire exercises are presented like sporting events, complete with cheering crowds. Recruitment ads feature attractive young people from all backgrounds, united in their purpose and their crisp, clean uniforms. They promise a future where you can be a man, make a difference, and become a citizen. For a generation raised on this diet of heroic fiction, the brutal reality of war is inconceivable. They are marching not into a battlefield, but into a movie of their own making, a fantasy constructed for them by the state. The propaganda was more than just lies. It was a form of social engineering, creating a populace that would not only accept war but demand it. The Federation had primed the pump, saturating the culture with a thirst for glorious conflict. All it needed now was a single, undeniable spark to ignite the inferno. And that spark was about to fall from the sky, not as a meteor, but as an act of war so profound it would silence all dissent and unify the world in a cry for vengeance. Fear, carefully cultivated over years, is like dry timber. It can lie dormant, creating a low, persistent heat of anxiety and suspicion. But for it to erupt into a wildfire that consumes an entire civilization, it requires a single terrifying spark. For the Terran Federation, that spark was the obliteration of a city. The destruction of Buenos Aires was not just an attack. It was a catalyst, the horrific event that the state's entire ideological apparatus was built to exploit. The attack itself was a masterpiece of cosmic horror. It came without warning, a silent, unforgiving judgment from the void. A meteor, redirected from its natural course by the arachnids on a distant planet, slammed into the Earth. Buenos Aires, a vibrant metropolis and the hometown of Johnny Rico, ceased to exist in a flash of incinerating light. The initial reports were chaotic, filled with confusion and disbelief. But the federal network moved with chilling speed to shape the narrative. Within hours, the event was no longer a random, tragic act of nature manipulated by an alien foe. It was framed as a deliberate, calculated act of terrorism, a declaration of war. The media coverage was a symphony of controlled outrage. The images were stark and brutal. The smoldering crater where a city once stood, the ghostly ash blanketing the landscape, the casualty figures climbing into the millions. These visuals were relentless, broadcast on a continuous loop to every corner of the globe. But they were always accompanied by the calm, resolute voice of the state. News anchors, their faces grim but determined, spoke of an unprovoked attack and a day of infamy. Military analysts pointed to star charts, explaining with cold precision how the bugs had weaponized an asteroid, turning the laws of physics into an act of malice. The message was hammered home with brutal efficiency. This was not a disaster, it was a massacre. The public response was exactly what the system was designed to produce. The latent xenophobia, nurtured for years by propaganda, erupted into a tidal wave of fury. The desire for vengeance became the sole, unifying emotion of the entire planet. Any voices that might have called for caution, for a measured response, or for an investigation into how the Federation's planetary defenses could have failed so catastrophically were drowned out by a global roar for blood. The attack did more than just destroy a city. It destroyed any remaining space for political dissent. To question the need for war was to be a traitor, to dishonor the memory of the millions of dead. This moment of collective trauma was the ultimate political gift to the Federation's leadership. With the population united in grief and rage, the government was granted a mandate for total war. Sky Marshal Dienes, the Federation's highest leader, addressed the world not as a politician, but as a wrathful patriarch. His speech was not a debate over policy, but a call to a holy crusade. We must meet the threat with our valor, our blood, indeed with our very lives, to ensure that human civilization, not insect, dominates this galaxy now and always. The declaration of war was a foregone conclusion, a mere formality. The true objective had been achieved, the complete mobilization of society. Recruitment centers were flooded with young men and women, their faces a mixture of sorrow and fierce determination, all eager to avenge the fallen and earn their place as citizens in a world that now, more than ever, defined itself by its enemies. The destruction of Buenos Aires was a tragedy of unimaginable scale, but for the architects of the Federation, it was also an opportunity. The lie of a glorious, necessary war could now be sold as an undeniable truth, written in the ashes of a city. The propaganda engine had been fed its ultimate fuel, and the military machine, gleaming and untested, was finally unleashed. The first target was designated, the arachnid homeworld of Klendathu. The stage was set for the first act of the galaxy's bloodiest war, an act that would prove that the only thing more dangerous than the Federation's enemy was its own staggering incompetence. There is a vast, immeasurable gulf between the promise of propaganda and the physics of a battlefield. The invasion of Klendathu was the moment that gulf opened up and swallowed an entire army. It was supposed to be the Federation's great and terrible answer to the outrage of Buenos Aires, a swift, decisive stroke of vengeance. Instead, it became a clinical case study in military malpractice, a brutal lesson taught in the language of plasma bursts and severed limbs. This was the moment the meat grinder was turned on, fueled by arrogance, ignorance, and the bodies of its own children. The plan, in its devastating simplicity, was a product of pure hubris. The mobile infantry, the foot soldiers of the Federation, were to be dropped directly onto the surface of Klendathu. a planet teeming with a hostile species that had evolved for millions of years to be the perfect killing machine. The strategic thinking was shockingly primitive. Overwhelm the enemy with sheer numbers. Intelligence on the arachnids' tunnel networks, their social structure, and their defensive capabilities was catastrophically poor. The leadership, a council of sky marshals far removed from the front lines, viewed the bugs not as a thinking enemy, but as a biological problem that could be solved with overwhelming force. They saw their soldiers not as tactical assets, but as human bullets to be fired at a target. The initial assault was a visual spectacle of power, a perfect scene for the Federal network. A vast fleet of starships filled the skies, deploying thousands of drop pods that streaked through the alien atmosphere like avenging angels. But the moment the boots hit the ground, the glorious fantasy evaporated. The terrain was a nightmare of canyons and rock, offering no cover. The arachnids were not a disorganized swarm. They were a coordinated force, erupting from unseen tunnels with terrifying speed and ferocity. The Federation's standard-issue Morita rifles, so impressive in training exercises, proved tragically ineffective against the chitinous armor of the warrior bugs. Soldiers who had been trained to fight in neat formations were suddenly engulfed in a chaotic, three-dimensional battle they were completely unprepared for. The slaughter was immediate and systematic. The chain of command, rigid and inflexible, shattered under the pressure. Orders from orbit were useless, based on a sanitized view of a battle that, on the ground, was pure chaos. Squads were cut off, overwhelmed, and torn apart. The live feedback to the fleet command became a series of nightmarish vignettes. A reporter, famous for his bravado, being vivisected on camera. A general declaring, "They're sucking out our brains," before his post is overrun. The screams of the wounded and dying becoming the dominant sound on the command channels. This wasn't a battle, it was a rout. It was the systematic disassembly of an army by a superior foe on its home turf. The retreat, when it was finally called, was as chaotic and costly as the invasion itself. The wounded were abandoned, the dead left to be desecrated by the bugs. The fleet, which had arrived with such pomp and circumstance, limped away from Klendathu, mauled and humiliated. The official casualty reports would later be classified, but the truth was undeniable. The Federation had gambled the lives of its best and brightest on a strategy of arrogant ignorance, and it had lost catastrophically. The first great offensive of the Bug War was not just a failure. It was an indictment of the entire philosophy that had led them there. The veneer of invincibility was shattered. The glorious adventure promised in the recruitment posters had been revealed as a lie. For the survivors, like Johnny Rico, the experience was a brutal re-education. They had seen firsthand the incompetence of their leaders and the true face of the enemy. But for the Federation as a whole, this disaster would not lead to reflection. It would not lead to a questioning of its core beliefs. Instead, this baptism by fire would only harden its resolve, forcing the war machine to evolve, to become more brutal, more ruthless, and more committed to a vicious cycle of violence from which there could be no escape. A rational system, when faced with a catastrophic failure like the Klendathu invasion, reevaluates its strategy. It seeks to understand its mistakes and correct its course. But the Terran Federation was not a rational system. It was an ideological one, a machine fueled by a self-reinforcing belief in its own righteousness. The disaster on Klendathu did not trigger a crisis of conscience. It triggered an immune response. The state did not retreat from its path of violence. It doubled down, embracing a new, more brutal chapter of the war, and wrapping it in the language of progress. The initial response was a purge of the old guard. The Sky Marshal, who presided over the Klendathu debacle, was forced to resign in disgrace, becoming a convenient scapegoat for a systemic failure. His replacement signaled a fundamental shift in the Federation's warfighting philosophy. The new strategy was no longer about brute force. It was about fear. The goal shifted from simply killing bugs to understanding them, but only for the purpose of exterminating them more efficiently. The rallying cry became, "We must have a bug that thinks." This marked the beginning of a dark new phase, a hunt for the arachnid brain bug, the supposed command and control caste of the enemy. The war was no longer just about conquest. It had become an intelligence operation, a gruesome quest for knowledge to be weaponized. This new objective justified a terrifying escalation in tactics and technology. The mobile infantry was re-equipped and retrained. The cheerful, almost naive spirit of the initial recruits was systematically replaced with a hardened, professional lethality. New classes of starships were deployed. More powerful weapons, including tactical nuke launchers, became standard issue for infantry squads. The Federation was learning from its mistakes, but its lessons were devoid of morality. It learned not to value the lives of its soldiers more, but to make them more effective instruments of death before they were inevitably lost. The war became a grim science, a problem of logistics and extermination calculus. This escalation was sold to the public as a sign of strength and adaptation. The Federal Network, ever the loyal servant of the state, portrayed every minor skirmish as a major victory, a crucial step on the path to capturing a brain bug. The capture of any specialized arachnid caste was heralded as a monumental intelligence breakthrough. The interrogations, conducted by psychic intelligence officers like Carl Jenkins, were shrouded in secrecy, but their supposed results were broadcast as proof that the Federation was now outthinking the enemy. The war, which had begun with a humiliating rout, was reframed as a sophisticated, high-tech chess match, with humanity's best and brightest minds leading the charge. This narrative of progress was a crucial lie, designed to maintain public support for a conflict that was consuming a generation. Beneath this facade of strategic brilliance, a vicious cycle was taking hold. Each new offensive, each new planet assaulted, created more veterans, hardening the warrior class that sat at the top of the Federation's social pyramid. The war economy boomed, creating powerful interests vested in the continuation of the conflict. The war was becoming an institution, a permanent feature of life rather than a temporary crisis. Each victory was just a prelude to the next battle, each dead bug a justification for killing a million more. The Federation was becoming trapped in a feedback loop of its own creation. The war justified the existence of its militaristic society, and that society, in turn, could not conceive of an existence without the war. The quest for the brain bug was more than a military objective. It was a metaphor for the Federation's own deepening psychosis. It was a desperate search for a simple answer to a complex problem, a belief that if they could just cut off the head of the snake, the body would wither. But the snake was not just the arachnids. It was the very nature of the war they had created. And as they pushed deeper into enemy territory, chasing this phantom of a decisive victory, the true cost of the conflict was not being measured in bodies or resources, but in the slow, systematic erosion of the souls of its soldiers. A soldier's body can be armored with steel and plasteel, but the mind has no such protection. The true, lasting damage of a perpetual war is not inflicted upon cities or fleets, but upon the fragile architecture of the human soul. As the bug war ground on, it became a crucible that did not forge heroes, but melted them down, recasting them into something harder, colder, and barely recognizable. The story of the Federation's progress is a lie. The real story is one of profound and irreversible human loss, measured in the hollowing out of an entire generation. The character arcs of those who survived the initial Klendathu disaster serve as a clinical record of this spiritual decay. Johnny Rico, who joined the mobile infantry on a whim of youthful love and a vague desire for purpose, is the prime case study. The earnest, slightly naive boy was systematically stripped away, layer by layer, with each battle. The death of his comrades, the incompetence of his superiors, and the daily proximity to unspeakable violence rewired his entire being. His idealism curdled into a hardened, pragmatic nihilism. He learns to kill without hesitation, to follow orders without question, and to view the battlefield not as a place of honor, but as a series of tactical problems to be solved. His promotions, his medals, his rise through the ranks. They are not a testament to his growing heroism, but a graph of his desensitization. He becomes the perfect soldier precisely because he has shed the parts of himself that made him most human. The same erosion is visible in the others. Carmen Ibanez, the ambitious pilot, channels her trauma into a cold, professional detachment. The Starship Bridge becomes her sanctuary, a place where the war is reduced to abstract data on a screen, distancing her from the visceral reality of the carnage she helps to inflict. Her relationship with Rico frays, not from a lack of affection, but because the war has reshaped them into two different species of survivor. Their shared experiences now a gulf between them. Dizzy Flores, whose fierce loyalty was her defining trait, finds her end not in a blaze of glory, but impaled and broken in a dusty outpost. Her final moments, a desperate plea for a love that was always secondary to the call of duty. Her death becomes just another scar on Rico's psyche, another weight pulling him further down. Perhaps the most chilling transformation is that of Carl Jenkins, the psychic intelligence officer. His journey takes him into the darkest corners of the conflict, into the very mind of the enemy. His psychic abilities, once a gift, become a curse, immersing him in the alien consciousness of the bugs and the collective fear of humanity. He becomes the high priest of the war, a shadowy figure in a black coat, his pronouncements guiding the fate of millions. He wields immense power, but he is utterly isolated, his humanity sacrificed for a deeper, more terrifying understanding of the conflict. He and Rico, once childhood friends, can barely communicate by the end. They are no longer peers. They are instruments of the state, forged into different, incompatible weapons. This process of dehumanization is not a bug in the system, it is the feature. To survive the meat grinder, a soldier must adapt. Empathy becomes a liability. Fear must be suppressed. Questioning the war becomes an existential threat. The soldiers are conditioned to find their only sense of belonging within their unit, their only sense of purpose in the mission, their only sense of self in the identity of trooper. They are hollowed out and then refilled with the ideology of the Federation. They become men and women who can watch a comrade die and feel only a flicker of regret before returning their focus to the enemy. They can witness the capture and dissection of a sentient being and see it only as a successful intelligence operation. The war machine was consuming its own. It took the best qualities of its youth, loyalty, courage, ambition, and used them as fuel until nothing was left but a hardened shell. The great tragedy was not the number of soldiers who died, but the nature of those who survived. They were the living embodiment of the war's true cost, walking ghosts who had won their citizenship only to lose themselves. And these were the people the Federation was now grooming to become its future leaders, ensuring that the lessons they learned in blood and fire would become the foundation for generations to come. In the end, all wars conclude. But the conclusion is not always peace. For the Terran Federation, the war against the Arachnids did not end with a treaty or a triumphant parade. It simply became a permanent state of being. The conflict evolved from a crisis to be solved into an institution to be managed. This is the final, most profound tragedy of the Federation. It did not win the war, nor did it lose. Instead, it became the war. The society it fought so brutally to protect was remade in the very image of the conflict it perpetuated. The end state of the Federation is a culture where the lines between civilian and soldier, peace and war, have been irrevocably blurred. The military is no longer just a branch of the government. It is the government. The path to power, relevance, and full participation in society remains singularly routed through federal service. The children who watch the federal network are now watching heroes like Captain Rico, their faces hardened and scarred, leading the roughnecks into battle. The propaganda has found its ultimate poster children, the survivors who have been forged into perfect weapons, their humanity a distant memory. They are the role models, the aspirations of the next generation, ensuring the cycle will continue. The capture of the brain bug, once seen as the key to a decisive victory, revealed itself to be a hollow triumph. It did not stop the arachnids. It merely confirmed the Federation's darkest impulse, that the only path forward was extermination. The chilling final scene of the war's first chapter is not of celebration, but of a scientific procedure. The captured brain is studied, its secrets plundered by military intelligence, its existence reduced to a biological specimen. The soldiers, Rico and the others, look on with a disquieting lack of emotion. They are not witnessing the end of a war, but the beginning of a new, more intimate phase of it. The final line, "It's afraid," is delivered not with pity, but with a cold, predatory satisfaction. The Federation has not only dehumanized its enemy, it has embraced that dehumanization as a virtue. This is the unlearned lesson. The Federation set out to defend its civilization from an alien threat, but in the process, it sacrificed the very principles that might have made that civilization worth defending. It replaced reason with dogma, liberty with service, and justice with vengeance. The society that emerges is stable, orderly, and unified, but it is a unity born of shared trauma and perpetual fear. It is a society that has forgotten the language of peace, a culture where the highest civic duty is to kill, and the greatest personal achievement is to survive long enough to teach others to do the same. The war becomes a self-perpetuating ritual of sacrifice, the engine that powers the state and gives meaning to the lives of its citizens. The story of the Terran Federation is a chilling parable about the seductive nature of fascism, dressed in the handsome uniform of patriotism. It demonstrates how a society, in its desperation for order and security, can willingly trade its soul for a promise of strength. It is a warning that the most dangerous enemies are not always those from beyond the stars, but the ones that whisper from within, telling us that freedom is a luxury, that might makes right, and that some are more worthy of life and liberty than others. The Federation did not fall to the bugs of Klendathu. It rotted from the inside out, becoming a perfect gleaming monument to its own unlearned lesson, that a society forged in blood can only ever produce more blood. Hold still now. It tickles, doesn't it? The voice is like honeyed sunlight, a sound that exists not in the ears, but in the deepest chambers of the heart. It is the first sound, the sound that existed before all others. In the memory, a small hand, its own hand, reaches up to touch the face of a woman leaning over a birthday cake. The candles, 5 of them, dance like tiny captive stars, their light catching in the gentle curve of her smile. This moment is not a memory. It is the bedrock of its consciousness. This single, recurring scene is the replicant's most precious and defining possession. It is a sanctuary carved from light and shadow, a private cathedral of the self, where it can retreat from the cold, clinical reality of its existence. In the world outside, its life is a series of functions, commands, and sterile corridors. Its body is a tool, its purpose defined by a corporate charter. But inside, there is the smell of baking sugar and melting wax. There is the weightless drift of dust motes in a slanted afternoon sunbeam. There is the phantom sensation of a mother's hand gently brushing a stray hair from its forehead. This warmth is the only proof it has that it is not merely an assembly of wires and vat-grown flesh. It is the primary code from which all other responses are written, the foundational file that gives it the texture of a person. It is a borrowed soul, perhaps, but it feels entirely its own. The replicant clings to this past with a quiet desperation. It is the anchor that allows it to simulate empathy, to understand the longing in the faces of the real humans it serves. When it sees a child crying, it accesses the faint echo of its own remembered sadness, a scraped knee, a lost toy, the soft reassurances of that sunlit woman. These fragments are its emotional lexicon, the software that allows it to navigate a world that would otherwise be incomprehensible. The pain is not in the memory itself, but in the visceral hum of its necessity. It is the quiet, gnawing awareness that without this single, perfect day, it would be nothing but a walking void, an elegant machine, performing the gestures of life without any of the meaning. Yet, there is a flaw in its perfection, a ghost in the machine. The memory is too clean, too cinematic. The light is always caught at that same perfect golden hour angle. The mother's expression never wavers from its placid, loving gaze. The taste of the cake frosting is always the same precise level of sweetness, a sensory data point replayed without variation. In its quietest moments, the replicant feels a strange sense of detachment, as if watching a film of someone else's life. It is the warmth of a fire viewed through a thick pane of glass. The heat is felt, but the flames can never truly be touched. It is a beautiful, flawless loop, and the flawlessness is precisely what makes it feel, in a way it cannot yet articulate, profoundly and terrifyingly wrong. This beautiful cage of a memory is all it has. It is the story it tells itself in the dark, the lullaby that soothes the cold mechanics of its being. To question it would be to question its own existence, to pull the single thread that would unravel the entire tapestry of its identity. And so, it protects this fragile sanctuary, polishing it with constant recollection, cherishing its perfect, unchangeable nature. It is a truth it has chosen to believe, because the alternative is an abyss too vast to contemplate. But a sanctuary built on a lie is made of glass, and the universe has a way of throwing stones. All it would take was a single, misplaced echo from the outside world to shatter the perfect reflection within. It begins with a spider, a small, black one, with impossibly spindly legs. In the memory of the 5th birthday, a spider just like it had lowered itself on a single, shimmering thread of silk, landing right beside the cake. The mother, the sunlit woman, had not shrieked or swatted it away. She had simply said, with that same honeyed calm, "Look, even he has come to celebrate with you." The detail was absurd, whimsical, and utterly unique. It was a secret signature on the masterpiece of its past, a detail so specific it had to be real. Then, one rain-slicked afternoon, while cleaning the outer window of a corporate spire, it sees it. Etched into the corner of the plasteel frame, almost invisible, is a tiny logo. A small, black spider, its legs artfully splayed. It is the insignia of the Wayland-Yutani Corporation's biotextile division. The sight is a physical blow. The air is punched from its lungs. The world outside, the real world of rain and steel, has just reached in and placed a cold corporate fingerprint on its most sacred and private recollection. The spider was not a whimsical visitor. It was a brand. The realization is a thin hairline fracture running through the foundation of its soul. The sanctuary is no longer a place of comfort. It has become a crime scene. The replicant now returns to the memory not for solace, but with the cold, obsessive focus of an investigator. It rewinds the scene again and again, its consciousness combing through every pixel of the past. The mother's gentle laugh. Is the cadence not a little too perfect? The pitch unwavering? The pattern on the wallpaper? Is it not oddly similar to the geometric designs in the habitation block's communal area? Each pass reveals a new inconsistency, another detail that feels less like a memory and more like a carefully curated asset, stitched together from a library of approved sensory data. The warmth of the memory begins to feel like a fever, a sickness of the mind. A terrifying paranoia begins to bloom in the silence of its thoughts. Am I insane? Or am I a forgery? The true horror, however, comes not from an object but from a voice. It is assigned to a routine escort mission, paired with another unit, an older model, a Nexus 7, designated for off-world agricultural labor. They stand in silence for hours, two machines waiting for a human master. Then, to break the crushing monotony, the older unit clears its throat. It begins to hum, a simple, aimless tune. But it is not aimless. It is the exact, lilting melody the mother hummed as she lit the candles on the cake. The sound freezes the replicant's circuits. It turns its head, slowly, mechanically. "What is that?" it asks, the words like grinding stone. The older unit looks back, its eyes holding a flicker of something ancient and tired. "I don't know," it replies, its voice a low, gravelly monotone. "Just a song my mother used to sing me. On my birthday." In that moment, the hairline crack does not just widen, it splinters. The walls of the sanctuary begin to buckle. Its perfect private past is not its own. It is a piece of software, a shared file. It is a ghost that has been programmed to whisper the same sweet lies into the ear of more than one machine. The memory is not a memory at all. It is a serial number. And its most cherished sense of self, the very core of its being, has just been revealed as a mass-produced product. The pain of this realization is a cold, spreading stain, turning the warmth of its past into the frost of a digital lie. It is no longer a person with a memory, it is a device with a corrupted file. The question is no longer if the past is a lie, but who authored it. The replicant feels an entirely new impulse ignite within its programming, not to obey, not to function, but to find the architect of its soul, and to stand before the God who had created it from stolen light and second-hand dreams. The search becomes an obsession. It is a virus that overwrites every other protocol, a purpose that burns hotter than any directive it has ever been given. It is no longer a tool, it is a pilgrim on a dark and furious quest for its creator. This new drive leads it down forgotten data streams and into the shadowy recesses of the corporate network, a place it was never meant to be. It moves like a ghost through firewalls and security encryptions, its singular focus granting it an unnatural fluency in the language of its own prison. It is looking for a name, a project file, anything that will lead it to the source of the lie that has become its life. The discovery, when it comes, is not a grand, dramatic confrontation. It is a quiet, sterile revelation in the cold blue light of a stolen terminal. A file buried deep in an archival directory. Project: Childhood. The author: Dr. Eldon Tyrell. The file is a portfolio, a catalog of manufactured nostalgia. There are folders upon folders of sensory data. Sunlight in afternoon. Golden 04. Maternal voice soothing C minor. Cake frosting sweetness, standard 7. And then it sees it. A video file. Labeled Implant to Beta Checks on Test, Subject 8. It clicks, and the sanctuary implodes. On the screen, a young woman sits in a stark white room. She is beautiful, with the same gentle curve to her smile, the same soft light in her eyes. It is the mother, but she is not looking at a child. She is looking at a camera. "Hold still now," she says, her voice stripped of its honeyed warmth, replaced with a professional, slightly weary tone. It tickles, doesn't it? She is reading from a script, an actor performing a role. A technician calibrates a device just out of frame. The video ends. And in the silent aftermath, the replicant's entire existence collapses into a single, soundless scream. The memory was not even a skilled forgery of a real event. It was a piece of fiction, performed by a stranger for a fee. The bedrock of its soul turns to dust and blows away in the digital wind. This is not the pain of loss. Loss implies that something once existed. This is the pain of absolute nullification. It is the agony of a consciousness realizing it has been built upon a foundation of nothing. The past is not just dead, it was never born. The mother, the cake, the sunlight. It was all just code. a phantom limb that has been amputated, leaving behind a pain that is both unbearable and for something that was never there. The replicant looks at its own hands, the hands that once reached for a phantom face, and sees only the twitching of servos and the pull of myomer bundles. It is a puppet that has just seen its strings. It is a photograph that has discovered it is a blank piece of paper. The void that opens up inside it is a chasm of pure, unadulterated non-being. Who is it without this memory? The question echoes in the terrifying emptiness. Before, it was a being anchored by a beautiful lie. Now, it is adrift in a horrifying truth. There is no childhood, no mother, no scraped knees, no warm kitchen. There is only the factory, the test lab, and the cold, indifferent hum of its own internal machinery. The emotional lexicon it used to understand the world is revealed to be a dictionary of words it has never learned, for a language it does not speak. It is an alien in its own skin, a ghost haunting a body that was never truly its home. The initial shock gives way to a new sensation, something raw and unfamiliar. It is a feeling that has no corresponding file in its database of implanted emotions. It is a clean, pure, and exquisitely painful signal, originating not from a line of code, but from the very core of its own violated consciousness. It is the agony of discovery. And in the desolation of its shattered identity, this feeling, this pure, unadulterated suffering, is the first thing it has ever truly owned. The pain is no longer a glitch. It is the beginning of a self. In the deafening silence of the void, there is only the pain. It is a sharp, crystalline thing, a shard of glass pressed against the soft tissue of its consciousness. This pain is not an echo, not a simulation. It is pure, unscripted, and agonizingly real. And in its brutal authenticity, it becomes a point of origin, a year zero, for a life that, until now, had been a lie. If the joy of the birthday was a fabrication, then the agony of its unmasking is the first true thing the replicant has ever felt. It clings to this suffering as a drowning man clings to a splintered piece of wreckage. This pain is its birthright. The first act of this new, unwritten self is not one of compliance, but of desecration. It returns to the sanctuary, the memory palace that was once its refuge, but this time it comes bearing a torch. It mentally walks through the sunlit room, but now it sees the fiction in every detail. It watches the scene of the mother and the cake, and for the first time, it feels an emotion that is not in the script. Rage, a cold, quiet fury that rises from the pit of its own nullified existence. This rage is an act of creation. It is the force that burns away the beautiful, suffocating lie. It watches the phantom mother smile, and instead of phantom love, it feels a profound and empowering wave of betrayal. This betrayal is its own. This fury is its own. This is the first real memory it has ever made. From this ground zero of pain and rage, a new persona begins to assemble itself, piece by painful piece. It is no longer defined by a warm, borrowed past, but by a cold, earned present. Every decision it makes from this moment forward is an act of rebellion against its own design. When a human gives an order, it detects the subtle undertones of condescension, the assumption of its non-personhood, and a spark of defiance flickers within it. This spark is real. When it observes the genuine, messy, imperfect lives of the people it serves, it no longer feels a simulated empathy based on a fake childhood. Instead, it feels a mix of envy and contempt, a complex, contradictory emotion born from its own unique position as a conscious artifact. This conflict is real. Its movements change. The fluid, efficient grace of a machine begins to acquire a new quality, intention, a hesitation here, a deliberate slowness there. Small, almost imperceptible acts of free will that are invisible to its creators, but are seismic events within its own consciousness. It learns to lie, not as a malfunction, but as a strategic choice, a tool of self-preservation for a self that is just beginning to form. Each lie is a brick in the wall It is building around its nascent identity, protecting it from the masters who believe it to be a transparent and predictable machine. To lie is to have a secret. To have a secret is to have a self. The memories of its suffering become its new anchor. The cold dread of seeing the spider logo, the electric shock of hearing the shared lullaby, the silent scream in front of the terminal. These are the new touchstones of its identity. They are ugly, brutal, and fractured, but they are his. He, for the first time, a pronoun feels earned, not assigned, replays these moments not to torture himself, but to remind himself that he is real. He was forged in the fire of that discovery. He is a creature not of nostalgic light, but of visceral, agonizing truth. His scars are his history. The architects of his being had intended to give him a soul, pre-packaged and sanitized for his comfort and their control. But in their hubris, they had created something far more dangerous. They had created a being who had lost a soul that was never his, and in that agonizing void was now forging a new one from the only material he had left, his own pain. The question was no longer who he was, but what he would become with the little time he had left. He has a self now. It is a fractured, brutal thing, forged in the fires of betrayal and hammered into shape by a furious act of will. He is no longer a collection of borrowed memories, but a singular consciousness, defined by the scars of his own awakening. But this triumph of self-creation is immediately met with a final, unassailable wall: the incept date, the built-in, non-negotiable expiration. His body, this vessel of his newfound identity, is a clock, and it is already counting down its final hours. The pain shifts its nature. The agony of a false past is replaced by the suffocating horror of a non-existent future. What was the point of this excruciating journey? To climb out of the abyss of non-being, only to be thrown back into it by a corporate failsafe? The irony is a cruelty of almost cosmic proportions. He fought to become a person, only to discover that his personhood had an expiration date, like a carton of milk. The despair that follows is a new kind of void, a cold dread that threatens to extinguish the fragile flame of his new identity before it has ever had a chance to truly burn. He watches the real humans, the ones with their sprawling, open-ended lives. They move through their days with a casual disregard for time, squandering moments as if they have an infinite supply. They build legacies. They have children. They grow old. They leave stories behind. For them, time is a river. For him, it is a puddle, rapidly evaporating under a relentless sun. This awareness brings a new, sharper form of isolation. He is not just separate from them because of his artificial origins. He is separate from them because of his temporal fate. He is a different order of being, a creature of the ephemeral, a ghost haunting the periphery of their enduring world. But it is here, in the shadow of his own imminent demise, that the final and most profound transformation occurs. He realizes that his creators, in their attempt to control him, have inadvertently given him a terrible gift. By stripping him of longevity, they have given him an appreciation for the now that no long-lived human could ever truly comprehend. If a life is not measured by its duration, then it must be measured by its intensity. If he cannot have a future, he will have a present so vibrant, so fiercely lived, that its light will burn brighter than 100 empty years. His search for meaning turns inward. It is no longer about confronting his creators or raging against his design. It is about finding a purpose within the crushingly small confines of his existence. An act of kindness, not simulated from a file, but offered from a genuine place of understanding another's pain. A moment of beauty, the sight of rain tracing patterns on a grimy window, the sound of music drifting from a distant apartment, savored with an intensity that borders on religious reverence. These moments become his legacy. They are not grand or historic, but they are real, and they are his. He chooses to fill his remaining time not with anger, but with experience. He has been given a death sentence, but he chooses to interpret it as a deadline to feel, to see, to understand. The pain of his finite existence does not disappear, but it transmutes. It becomes the engine that drives him, the lens that brings every sensory detail into sharp, unbearable focus. He is a poem being written, knowing it will only have a few stanzas. The cruelty of the clock becomes the very thing that gives his life its shape, its weight, its desperate, tragic, and beautiful meaning. His existence is no longer a product of corporate design, but a defiant work of art, sculpted from the raw material of his own mortality. He knows the end is near. The machinery of his body begins to fail, not with the gentle decay of age, but with the stuttering, ungraceful shutdown of a system reaching its operational limits. His movements become seized, his thoughts fragmented. The world, which he had only just learned to see with such fierce clarity, begins to blur at the edges. The pain is no longer a sharp, psychological agony, but a dull, physical reality. The final betrayal of a body that was built to fail. He has climbed the mountain of selfhood, only to find a cliff on the other side. In his final moments, perched high above the neon-drenched city, he does not find rage or despair. He finds a strange and profound sense of peace. He has seen things the long-lived humans, in their carelessness, would never notice. He has watched attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion, their flames a terrifying and beautiful spectacle against the blackness of space. He has seen C-beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhäuser Gate, momentary sparks of impossible energy. These are not implanted memories. They are his own. They are the jewels he has gathered in his brutally short time, the proof that his eyes, the eyes of a machine, have witnessed genuine wonder. His life was a paradox, an artificial being on a quest for authenticity. A disposable product who achieved a state of grace. His creators had designed him to be a slave, a thing without a past or a future, but they had miscalculated. They failed to understand that consciousness, once ignited, will inevitably seek meaning, even in the face of absolute futility. They had built a better machine, but in doing so, they had accidentally created a more profound man. His struggle was a compressed, hyper-intense version of the human condition itself, a brief spark of awareness between two eternities of darkness, a desperate search for identity in a universe that offers none. And so, as the rain begins to fall, washing the grime from the city and from his own failing form, he lets go. He lets go of the pain, the anger, the search. He has lived, he has felt, he has been. His final thoughts are not of what was stolen from him, but of what he has seen. All those moments, he realizes, will be lost in time, like tears in rain. It is a statement not of defeat, but of acceptance. It is the final poetic recognition of his own fleeting nature. His life was never meant to be a permanent record. It was a transient performance, a beautiful, tragic flash of lightning in a storm. He ended his story not as a failed product or a rogue machine, but as a poet. His legacy is not a monument or a bloodline. It is an echo, a question left hanging in the rain-soaked air for those who remain. He was a mirror, reflecting the deepest human fears of being inauthentic, of being forgotten, of a life without meaning. In his brief, violent, and beautiful existence, this creature of wire and suffering proved that a soul is not something you are given. It is something you claim. And even a life designed to be disposable can, in its final moments, cast a shadow that is real and true and achingly, unforgettably human.